The Grand Tesla event in Los Angeles was an electrifying spectacle of innovation and ambition. The stage, illuminated by the signature neon glow of the Tesla logo, stood as a symbol of progress. Cameras flashed, journalists jotted down notes, and an eager crowd of engineers, investors, and tech enthusiasts buzzed with anticipation. At the center of it all, standing tall in his signature black t-shirt and leather jacket, was Elon Musk, visionary, billionaire, and the man who had, time and again, pushed the boundaries of what was possible. His presence commanded the room, his words carrying the weight of the future. He spoke of AI advancements, space travel, and the revolutionary potential of Tesla's latest model. The audience hung on his every word, enthralled by his ability to make the impossible seem within reach. The energy in the room was electric, humming with the excitement that followed him wherever he went. But amidst the sea of admirers, a single figure moved with a different kind of urgency. Sophie stood near the back of the auditorium, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her worn-out purse. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breathing shallow. She hadn't come for the technology. She wasn't interested in self-driving cars or neural interfaces. She had come for him. The security presence was tight, as expected for an event of this magnitude, but Sophie knew she had only one chance. She waited for the perfect moment. As the Q&A session began, she weaved her way forward, her movements quick but deliberate. The questions were predictable. Investors asked about financial projections, engineers sought technical clarifications, and fans gushed about Tesla's impact on the world. And then, in a brief lull, she seized her moment. She stepped forward, her voice clear but firm, cutting through the noise with a single sentence that sent a ripple of shock through the audience. The words hung in the air, an unexpected disruption in an otherwise controlled environment. A few murmurs spread through the crowd as heads turned toward her. The event moderators hesitated, exchanging glances, uncertain how to proceed. Elon, caught off guard, furrowed his brows as his gaze landed on her. His reaction was swift, an initial look of confusion that quickly morphed into something colder, more dismissive. His stance shifted slightly, a familiar posture he adopted when deflecting unwanted attention. He had dealt with countless accusations, rumors, and opportunists before. He knew this game well. With a casual shake of his head, he waved off the claim as ridiculous. "Impossible," he said. His voice was steady, laced with an air of annoyance rather than concern. The idea that he had fathered a child with a woman he barely remembered was absurd. He had met thousands of people, spent countless fleeting moments in passing encounters. This was just another attempt to grab headlines, to force a response from him in front of cameras. Sophie did not flinch at his dismissal. She had anticipated this reaction, prepared for the skepticism. She spoke again, this time with more force, insisting on the truth of her words. She gave details, the date, the place, the night they had spent together. Specifics only someone who had been there could possibly know. A flicker of recognition flashed across Elon's face, almost imperceptible, but she caught it. For a brief moment, the air between them grew heavier. But he was too practiced in the art of denial, too well versed in brushing aside accusations that threatened his carefully crafted world. A tight smile formed at the corners of his lips as he dismissed her claims outright. His voice took on a sharper edge, accusing her of seeking attention, money, or simply trying to attach herself to his name for personal gain. His fans in the audience stirred uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement, others watching the exchange with curiosity. But Sophie didn't back down. She had spent 3 years carrying the weight of this truth alone, and she had no intention of letting him slip away without acknowledging it. She spoke of the financial struggles she faced, the mounting medical bills, the endless exhaustion of raising a child on her own. His child. Elon's expression hardened. It wasn't anger, it was something colder. A calculated dismissal. He had long mastered the ability to sever himself from distractions, from people who didn't fit into the trajectory of his mission. He had built rockets to escape gravity itself. This woman, this claim, was nothing more than an inconvenience. Security moved in, subtly but efficiently. The event staff stepped forward, signaling to remove her before she could press further. Sophie's voice rose, fueled by desperation, but before she could say more, the murmurs of the crowd swallowed her words. And just like that, she was escorted out. Elon, unfazed, turned back to the audience with an effortless shrug, making a light remark to shift the tension in the room. The crowd responded with nervous laughter, eager to return to the world of innovation and ambition rather than the messiness of personal responsibility. The moment was already being buried, reduced to a brief interruption in an otherwise flawless presentation. But as Elon resumed speaking, something lingered in the back of his mind. A name. A place. A fragment of a memory he had long forgotten, or perhaps chosen to forget. The tension in the auditorium had shifted from the calculated excitement of a Tesla event to an uncomfortable unease. Whispers rippled through the audience as Sophie stood her ground, refusing to disappear into the chaos. Though security had begun guiding her toward the exit, she twisted free, her voice cutting through the murmurs, forcing Elon to listen. She wasn't lying, and she had proof. With a controlled yet unwavering tone, she recounted the details, the night in question, the location, the way he had spoken to her, the precise way he had laughed at something she said. She described the setting, the dimly lit rooftop where they had ended the evening, the drink he had ordered, the small, inconsequential moments that no outsider could possibly know. The specificity of her words made the room still, even as Elon crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. It was there, brief but undeniable. He knew she wasn't entirely fabricating this story, but that didn't mean he would accept it. His patience, already thinning, gave way to irritation. His voice carried an edge now, measured but cutting, as he dismissed her claim outright. He had seen this before, the opportunists, the fabrications, the relentless pursuit of his wealth and name. He accused her of chasing attention, of crafting a story out of a fleeting encounter, twisting reality into something that could financially benefit her. Sophie didn't waver. Instead, she produced something from her bag, a photograph. The audience, already captivated by the unexpected spectacle unfolding before them, craned their necks to see. The image was of a young boy, no older than 3, with strikingly familiar features. The angular cheekbones, the sharp, inquisitive eyes, the unruly tuft of hair. A collective murmur swept through the room. Elon's jaw tightened. His gaze lingered on the photograph, but his expression remained a mask of indifference. Security moved in again, this time firmer, attempting to escort her away from the event. But Sophie refused to go quietly. She raised her voice, demanding that he acknowledge her, demanding that the world see what was happening. Journalists in the crowd had already pulled out their phones, cameras flashing, recording every moment. A few of them whispered into microphones, broadcasting live updates. The room had shifted from admiration of a tech giant to something far more unpredictable. Elon, ever the strategist, assessed the situation with cold calculation. He had spent years cultivating an image, one of genius, of power, of progress. This scene, unfolding in front of cameras and a global audience, was an unexpected variable. The story would be on every news site by morning. If he ignored it completely, the rumors would spiral out of control. And so, with a sigh of exasperation and an air of superiority, he made a decision. A test. A simple paternity test to prove the absurdity of her claims and to end this once and for all. He announced it with the same confidence he used when unveiling a new innovation, as though this, too, was just another problem to be solved. The journalists latched onto it instantly, headlines forming in their minds before they even left the room. Sophie watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. But as security finally ushered her away, one thing was clear, she had forced his hand. And whether he realized it or not, the battle had already begun. The results arrived in a sleek, official envelope, clinical, cold, and definitive. There was no ambiguity, no technical error to hide behind. The test confirmed what Sophie had been saying all along. The child was his. Elon read the results in silence, his fingers tightening around the paper as he processed the implications. For a brief moment, he was motionless, his mind calculating every possible way to handle this. But the quiet didn't last long. When the news broke, the world erupted. Headlines flooded every platform: Elon Musk's secret child confirmed, tech titan caught in paternity scandal, the billionaire, the woman, and the child he denied. The media devoured the story, turning it into a spectacle of judgment and speculation. Every outlet picked apart the details, analyzing Sophie's claims, dissecting Elon's initial reaction, and questioning what he would do next. The answer came swiftly. Fury burned beneath his otherwise composed exterior. He dismissed the situation entirely, treating the paternity confirmation as nothing more than an inconvenient distraction. There was no acknowledgement of the child, no statement of responsibility, only cold rejection. In private, his frustration boiled over, but in public, he controlled the narrative with the precision of a man accustomed to steering entire industries. He claimed he had been tricked. That Sophie had orchestrated the entire situation to force his hand, to publicly pressure him into a position he had never agreed to. If she had come to him privately, if she had handled this with discretion, perhaps things would have been different. But instead, she had humiliated him. She had turned something deeply personal into a scandal, into entertainment for the masses. His loyal followers latched onto his explanation, echoing his outrage. Social media swarmed with heated debates: was Sophie just another gold digger? Had she planned this from the start? Supporters dissected every moment of their past interaction, some arguing that she had set him up, others pointing to the resemblance between Elon and the boy as undeniable proof of responsibility. Sophie, trapped in the middle of the media storm, felt the weight of it all crushing her. She had expected resistance. She had prepared herself for the possibility that he might not accept their son with open arms. But the sheer coldness of his response, the way he painted her as a manipulator rather than a mother, cut deeper than she had imagined. Still, she refused to be erased. She did what she had sworn she would never do, she begged. Not for herself, but for their child. She revealed the part of the story she had kept private, the one detail that turned this from a battle of egos into something far more desperate. Their son was sick. The medical debt was staggering, climbing higher each month, the weight of it suffocating her. Every hospital visit, every specialist, every treatment, it had all drained her completely. She wasn't asking for luxury. She wasn't asking for fame. She was asking for help, for the father of her child to care if his son lived or died. The world held its breath, waiting for his response. It came with all the warmth of a steel blade. Not his problem. That was the message, whether spoken outright or implied in his dismissive stance. His life, his empire, his vision for the future, none of it had room for something as trivial as an obligation he had never asked for. If she wanted help, she should have thought about that before bringing this chaos into his world. The rejection landed harder than any public denial. This wasn't just about pride anymore. This was about life. About a child who had done nothing wrong but now carried the burden of a father who refused to care. Sophie felt the final thread of hope unravel. She had fought. She had screamed. She had pleaded. And in the end, all she received was silence. The scandal refused to die. No matter how much Elon tried to push forward, to drown out the noise with announcements of groundbreaking innovations, the world kept pulling him back to the one thing he had chosen to ignore. Headlines still swarmed with updates, speculations, and relentless criticism. Social media teemed with debates, some fiercely defending him, others condemning him as cold and heartless. News segments analyzed his every move, dissecting his calculated indifference. Some outlets framed it as another example of how the ultra-wealthy operated above normal morality, while others took a more personal angle, highlighting the boy's struggle, his medical condition, and the simple truth that no amount of money could change what was already confirmed. Elon Musk had a son, and he had turned his back on him. His inner circle began to shift uncomfortably under the weight of the controversy. Publicists scrambled to contain the damage, whispering about reputation management. Investors subtly questioned whether his distraction with personal matters would affect his ability to lead. Even those closest to him, people who had long been unwavering in their loyalty, began to voice disapproval behind closed doors. But it wasn't the media that began to chip away at him. It was the quiet disapproval from the few voices that actually mattered. His mother was the first to express it, not in anger or confrontation, but in the simple way she distanced herself, making it clear that she was disappointed. She had raised him to believe in responsibility, in the weight of one's choices. And though she had long since accepted his emotional detachment from most things, family was different. Whether he liked it or not, this child was his family. The word stuck with him, lingering in the back of his mind like an unresolved equation. Then came the message from one of his older children, a short but cutting remark that left him feeling something he hadn't in a long time: shame. He had always preached about shaping the future, about ensuring that his children would be part of something greater than themselves. But what lesson had he just taught them? That their father, the man they looked up to, the man who claimed to see the bigger picture, could so easily walk away from his own flesh and blood when it was inconvenient? He brushed it off at first, retreating into his usual defenses. Logic. Efficiency. The insistence that emotion had no place in decision-making. But the seed had been planted, and no matter how much he tried to ignore it, doubt had begun to take root. Then came the photograph. Someone, perhaps an assistant, perhaps someone who simply wanted to make him see, left it on his desk one evening. A simple image of a boy, not yet 4 years old, sitting in a hospital room. A child with sharp, intelligent eyes and an unmistakable resemblance to the man who refused to claim him. The sight of it unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. For the first time since the scandal had begun, he truly looked. The features, the posture, even the slight furrow of the child's brow, it was him. It was undeniable. That night, he barely slept. Memories surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. His own childhood. The feeling of growing up under a father who was more force than man, who demanded excellence but offered no warmth. He remembered the loneliness, the feeling of being shaped into something more machine than human. He had sworn never to be like that. He had sworn that, if nothing else, he would carve his own path, one dictated by logic and progress, yes, but not at the expense of basic decency. Had he failed? Had he become exactly the thing he had spent his life trying to outrun? Restless and unable to focus, he opened his laptop, intending to drown his thoughts in work. Instead, his cursor hovered over an email from Sophie. He had ignored most of her attempts to reach him, but this one had a single attachment, a video. For reasons he didn't fully understand, he clicked on it. The screen filled with the image of the boy, not in a hospital this time, but sitting on the floor, a toy spaceship clutched in his hands. He was laughing, a full, unrestrained sound that carried through the speakers with an innocence that had not yet learned rejection. Something inside him shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. For the first time, he wondered, had he made a mistake? The knock on Sophie's apartment door was firm and deliberate. She hadn't been expecting anyone, certainly not him. For a brief moment, she hesitated before opening it, her heart hammering in her chest. And then, standing in the dim hallway, dressed in his usual muted black but carrying an unfamiliar tension in his posture, was Elon Musk. She stared at him, uncertainty and exhaustion clouding her face. He had been absent for so long, dismissing both her and their son with cold indifference. But now, here he was, unannounced and unarmored, the weight of something unspoken pressing down on him. He had spent the entire drive questioning why he was even doing this. His logical mind had tried to convince him that this was damage control, that it was a calculated move to silence the backlash. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the real reason. He had seen the video. He had heard his son laugh. And for the first time, the idea of walking away felt more impossible than facing what he had tried so hard to ignore. Sophie stepped aside without a word, allowing him into the small apartment. It was modest, nothing like the polished, futuristic spaces he was used to. There were signs of a life far removed from his own, a stack of unpaid medical bills on the kitchen counter, a basket of tiny socks by the couch, a half-eaten bowl of cereal abandoned on the coffee table. Then, he saw him. The boy was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, surrounded by a scattered collection of toy cars and building blocks. He was constructing something, a crude, lopsided structure that almost resembled a rocket. His small fingers worked with surprising precision, his face set in deep concentration. Elon's breath caught in his throat. The resemblance was undeniable. The sharp eyes, the focused expression, the restless energy that hinted at a mind already reaching beyond its surroundings. It was as if he were staring at a smaller, untouched version of himself, one that had not yet learned ambition, or failure, or rejection. The boy looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with the unfiltered curiosity only a child could possess, the boy tilted his head slightly, studying the man in the doorway. Sophie watched silently from a few steps away, her arms crossed protectively. Her expression was unreadable, but there was caution in her eyes. She had fought too hard, endured too much, to let him walk in now and pretend a check would fix everything. But Elon wasn't looking at her. He was still staring at his son, the reality of him settling in like an uncharted equation, one he had refused to solve until now. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quieter than usual, lacking its usual confidence. He laid out the plan, the financial support, the best medical care available, the guarantee that the boy's future would be secure and limitless. Sophie listened, nodding slowly, but her face didn't soften. Money wasn't the issue. It never had been. She reminded him that this wasn't about transactions or responsibilities that could be fulfilled with a signature. Their son didn't need a billionaire benefactor. He needed a father. Elon had no immediate answer to that. For a man who had spent his life thinking in algorithms, in probabilities and calculations, this was something that could not be quantified. The boy watched them quietly, his small hands resting on his half-built creation. Then, as if making a decision of his own, he stood up and walked toward Elon, stopping just a foot away. Elon hesitated, his hands flexing slightly at his sides. He had given speeches before millions, had faced the harshest scrutiny, had launched entire industries from nothing, but he had never been more uncertain than he was in this moment. And then, as if the choice had already been made for him, he reached out and lifted his son into his arms. The boy was lighter than he expected, smaller, but undeniably real. Something shifted inside him. For all the things he had built, all the futures he had envisioned, all the legacies he had hoped to leave behind, this was the first time he felt like he was holding something that truly mattered.